13. In the den of tigers, the gold star brings deliverance at Double Fork Ridge. Bakken detains the monk. The rich Tang ruler issued a decree, deputing Chuanzing to seek the source of Chan. He bent his mind to find the dragon den, with firm resolve to climb the vulture peak. Through how many states did he roam beyond his own? Through clouds and hills he passed 10,000 times. He now leaves the throne to go to the west. He'll keep law and faith to reach the great void. We shall now tell you about Tripitaka, who, on the third day before the 15th of the 9th month in the 13th year of the period Zhengyuan, was sent off by the Tang emperor and many officials from outside the gate of Chang'an. For a couple of days his horse trotted without ceasing, and soon they reached the temple of the Law Gate. The abbot of that temple led some 500 monks on both sides to receive him and took him inside. As they met, tea was served, after which a vegetarian meal was presented. Soon after the meal, dusk fell, and thus, shadows moved to the Star River's nearing pulse. The moon was bright without a speck of dust. The wild geese caroled from the distant sky, and washing flails beat from nearby homes, as birds returned to perch on withered trees. The Chan monks conversed in their Sanskrit tones, on rest mats placed upon a single bunk. They sat until halfway through the night. Beneath the lamps the various monks discussed Buddhist doctrines and the purpose of seeking scriptures in the western heaven. Some pointed out that the waters were wide and the mountains very high. Others mentioned that the roads were crowded with tigers and leopards. Still others maintained that the precipitous peaks were difficult to scale, and another group insisted that the vicious monsters were hard to subdue. Tripitaka, however, kept his mouth shut tightly, but he pointed with his finger to his own heart and nodded his head several times. Not perceiving what he meant, the various monks folded their hands and asked, why did the master of the law point to his heart and nod his head? When the mind is active, Tripitaka replied, all kinds of more come into existence. When the mind is extinguished, all kinds of more will be extinguished. This disciple has already made an important vow before Buddha in the temple of transformation, and he has no alternative but to fulfill it with his whole heart. If I go, I shall not turn aside until I have reached the western heaven, seen Buddha, and acquired the scriptures so that the wheel of the law will be turned to us and the kingdom of our Lord will be secured forever. When the various monks heard this statement, everyone congratulated and commended him, saying, a loyal and valiant master. They praised him unceasingly as they escorted him to bed. Soon, the bamboo struck down the setting moon, and the cocks crowed to gather the clouds of dawn. The various monks arose and prepared some tea and the morning meal. Chuanzing put on his cassock and went to worship Buddha in the main hall. Your disciple, Shen Chuanzing, he said, is on his way to seek scriptures in the western heaven. But my fleshly eyes are dim and unperceptive and do not recognize the true form of the living Buddha. Now I wish to make a vow that throughout this journey I shall burn incense whenever I come upon a temple. I shall worship Buddha whenever I meet a Buddha, and I shall sweep a pagoda whenever I reach a pagoda. May our Buddha be merciful and soon reveal to me his diamond body 16 feet tall. May he grant me the true scriptures so that they may be preserved in the land of the East. He finished his prayer and went back to the hall for the vegetarian meal, after which his two attendants made ready the saddle and urged him to begin his journey. Going out of the temple's gate, Tripitaka took leave of the monks, who grieved to see him go. They accompanied him for 10 miles before turning back, tears in their eyes, as Tripitaka proceeded directly toward the west. It was the time of late autumn. You see, trees growing bare in hamlets as rush petals break. From every maple column the red leaves fall. Trekkers through paths of mist and rain are few. The fair chrysanthemums, the sharp mountain rocks, cold streams and cracked lilies all make one sad. Snow falls from a frosty sky on rushes and reeds. One duck at dusk descends in the distant void. Clouds over the wilds move through the gathering gloom. The swallows depart. The wild geese appear. Their cries, though loud, are halting and forlorn. After traveling for several days, master and disciples arrived at the city of Gongju. They were met at once by the various municipal officials of that city, where they spent the night. The next morning they set off again, taking food and drink along the way, resting by night and journeying by day. In 2 or 3 days, they arrived at the district of Hezhu, which formed the border of the great Tang Empire. When the garrison commander of the border as well as the local monks and priests heard that the master of the law, a bond brother of the emperor, was on his way to the western heaven to see Buddha by royal commission, they received the travelers with due reverence. Some chief priests then invited them to spend the night at Faiyuan Temple, where every resident cleric came to pay respect to the pilgrims. Dinner was served, after which the 2 attendants were told to feed the horses well, for the master wanted to leave before dawn. At the first crowing of the cock, he called for his attendants and aroused the monks of that temple. They hastened to prepare tea and breakfast, after which the pilgrims departed from the border. Because he was somewhat impatient to get going, the master arose a trifle too early. The fact is that this was late autumn, when cocks crow rather early, at about the time of the fourth watch. Facing the clear frost and the bright moon, the three of them, the horse, made up the fourth member of the team, journeyed for some 20 or 30 miles when they came upon a mountain range. It soon became exceedingly difficult for them to find their way, as they had to poke around in the grass to look for a path. They began to worry that they might be heading in the wrong direction. In that very anxious moment, they suddenly tripped, all three of them, as well as the horse, tumbled into a deep pit. Tripitaka was terrified. His companions all shook with fear. They were still trembling when they heard voices shouting, "Seize them! Seize them!" A violent wind swept by, and a mob of 50 or 60 ogres appeared, who seized Tripitaka with his companions and hauled them out of the pit. Quivering and shivering, the master of the law stole a glance around and saw a ferocious monster king seated up on high. Truly he had a figure most awesomely bold, a face most distinctly fierce. Light flashed from his lightning-like eyes, all quaked at his thunderous voice. His saw-like teeth jutted outward. Like fangs they emerged from his jaws. Brocade wrapped his body around, and coiling stripes covered his spine. They saw flesh through spars, steely whiskers. Keen-edged were his claws like sharp swords. Even Huanggong of East Sea would fear this white-browed king of Mount South. Tripitaka was so frightened that his spirit left him, while the bones of his followers grew weak and their tendons turned numb. The monster king shouted for them to be bound, and the various ogres tied up all three of them with ropes. They were being prepared to be eaten when a clamor was heard outside the camp. Someone came in to report, "The Bear Mountain Lord and the Steer Hermit have arrived." Hearing this, Tripitaka looked up. The first one to come in was a swarthy fellow. How did he look, you ask? He seemed valiant and courageous, with body both tough and brawny. His great strength could for the waters. He prowled the woods, flaunting his power. Ever a good omen in dreams, he showed now his forceful features. He could break or climb the green trees, and predicted when winter was near. Truly he was most clever. Hence Mountain Lord was his name. Following behind him was another husky fellow. How did he look, you ask? A cap of twin horns rugged, and a humpback most majestic. His green robe showed his calm nature. He walked with a slumberous gait. He came from a father named Bull. His mother's proper name was Cow. A great boon to people who plowed. He was thus called the Steer Hermit. The two of them swaggered in, and the monster king hurried out to receive them. The Bear Mountain Lord said, "You are in top form, General Yin. Congratulations, congratulations." "General Yin looks better than ever," said the Steer Hermit. "It's marvelous, it's marvelous. And you two gentlemen, how have you been these days?" asked the monster king. "Just maintaining my idleness," said the Mountain Lord. "Just keeping up with the times," said the hermit. After these exchanges, they sat down to chat some more. Meanwhile, one of Tripitaka's attendants was bound so tightly that he began to moan pitifully. "How did these three get here?" asked the swarthy fellow. "They practically presented themselves at the door," said the monster king. "Can they be used for the guests' dinner?" asked the hermit, laughing. "By all means," said the monster king. Let's not finish them all up," said the Mountain Lord. "Wait. They'll dine on two of them and leave one over." The monster king agreed. He called his subordinates at once to have the attendants eviscerated and their carcasses carved up. Their heads, hearts, and livers were to be presented to the guests, the limbs to the host, and the remaining portions of flesh and bone to the rest of the ogres. The moment the order was given, the ogres pounced on the attendants like tigers preying on sheep. Munching and crunching, they devoured them in no time at all. The priest nearly died of fear, for this, you see, was his first bitter ordeal since his departure from Chang'an. As he was nursing his horn, light began to grow in the east. The two monsters did not retire until dawn, saying, "We're beholden to your generous hospitality today. Permit us to repay in kind in another time." They left together. Soon the sun rose high in the sky, but Tripitaka was still in a stupor, unable to discern which way was north, south, east, or west. In that half-dead condition, he suddenly saw an old man approaching, holding a staff in his hands. Walking up to Tripitaka, the man waved his hands and all the ropes snapped. He then blew on Tripitaka, and the monk began to revive. Falling on the ground, he said, "I thank the aged father for saving the life of this poor monk." "Get up," the old man said, returning his salute. "Have you lost anything?" "The followers of your poor monk," said Tripitaka, have been eaten by the monsters. I have no idea where my horse is or my luggage. Listen, see that your horse over there with the 2 bundles?" asked the old man, pointing with his staff. Tripitaka turned around and discovered that his belongings had indeed remained untouched. Somewhat relieved, he asked the old man, "Aged father, what is this place? How do you happen to be here?" "It is called the Double Fork Ridge, a place infested with tigers and wolves." "How did you manage to get here?" "At the first crow of the cock," said Tripitaka. "Your poor monk left the district of Heshu. Little did I realize that we had risen too early, and we lost our way tramping through fog and dew. We came upon this monster king so exceedingly ferocious that he captured me and my 2 followers. There was also a swarthy fellow called the Bear Mountain Lord and a husky fellow called the Steer Hermit. They arrived and addressed the monster king as General Yin. All 3 of them devoured my 2 followers and retired only at dawn. I have no idea where I accrued the fortune and merit that caused the aged father to rescue me here." "That Steer Hermit," said the old man, "is a wild bull spirit, the Mountain Lord, a bear spirit, and General Yin, a tiger spirit. The various ogres are all demons of mountains and trees, spirits of strange beasts and wolves. Because of the primal purity of your nature, they cannot devour you. Follow me now, and I shall lead you on your way." Tripitaka could not be more thankful. Fastening the bundles on the saddle and leading his horse, he followed the old man out of the pit and walked toward the main road. He tied the horse to the bushes beside the path and turned to thank the aged father. At that moment a gentle breeze swept by, and the old man rose into the air and left, riding on a white crane with a crimson head. As the wind subsided, a slip of paper fluttered down, with 4 lines of verse written on it. "I'm the planet Venus from the west, who came to save you by special request."
Greetings, I'm
"What up, though? It's Big Some pupils divine will come to your aid. Blame not the scriptures for hardships ahead." When Tripitaka read this, he bowed toward the sky, saying, "I thank the gold star for seeing me through this ordeal." After that, he led his horse off again on his lonely and melancholy journey. On this ridge truly you have, cold and sullen, the wind of the rainforest, purling and gurgling, the water of the brooklets, fragrant and musky, wildflowers in bloom. In clutters and clumps, rough rocks piled high, chattering and clattering, the apes and the deer. In rank and file, the musk and the fallow deer. Chirping and cooing, birds frequently call. Silent and still, not one man is in sight. That master shivers and quivers to his anxious mind. This dear horse, scared and nervous, can barely raise his legs. Ready to abandon his body and sacrifice his life, Tripitaka started up that rugged mountain. He journeyed for half a day, but not a single human being or dwelling was in sight. He was gnawed by hunger and disheartened by the rough road. In that desperate moment, he saw 2 fierce tigers growling in front of him and several huge snakes circling behind him. Vicious creatures appeared on his left and strange beasts on his right. As he was all by himself, Tripitaka had little alternative but to submit himself to the will of heaven. As if to complete his helplessness, his horse's back was sagging him. His legs were buckling. It went to his knees and soon lay prostrate on the ground. He could budge it neither by beating nor by tugging. With hardly an inch of space to stand on, our master of the law was in the depths of despair, thinking that certain death would be his fate. We can tell you, however, that though he was in danger, help was on its way. For just as he thought he was about to expire, the vicious creatures began to scatter and the monstrous beasts fled. The fierce tigers vanished and the huge snakes disappeared. When Tripitaka looked further ahead, he saw a man coming over the mountain slope with a steel trident in his hands and bow and arrows at his waist. He was indeed a valiant figure. Look at him. He had on his head a cap of leopard skin, spotted and artemisia white. He wore on his body a robe of lamb's wool with dark silk brocade. Around his waist was tied a Lion King belt, and on his feet he wore tall boots of suede. His eyes would bulge like those of someone hung. His beard curled wildly like a fierce god's. A bow and poisoned arrows hung on him. He held a huge trident all finest steel. His voice like thunder appalled mountain cats, and wild pheasants quaked at his truculence. When Tripitaka saw him draw near, he knelt at the side of the path and called out, his hands clasped in front of him, "Great King, save me! Great King, save me!" The fellow came up to Tripitaka and put down his trident. Raising up the monk with his hands, he said, "Don't be afraid, elder, for I'm not a wicked man. I'm a hunter living in this mountain. My surname is Liu and my given name is Bakken. I also go by the nickname of Senior Guardian of the Mountain. I came here to find some animals to eat, not expecting to run into you. I hope I didn't scare you. Your poor monk, said Tripitaka, is a cleric who has been sent by His Majesty, the Tang Emperor, to seek scriptures from Buddha in the Western Heaven. When I arrived here a few moments ago, I was surrounded by tigers, wolves, and snakes, so that I could not proceed. But when the creatures saw you coming, they all scattered, and you have thus saved my life. Many thanks, many thanks. Since I live here and my livelihood depends on killing a few tigers and wolves, said Bakken, or catching a few snakes and reptiles, I usually frighten the wild beasts away. If you have come from the Tang Empire, you are actually a native here, for this is still Tang territory and I'm a Tang subject. You and I both live off the land belonging to the Emperor so that we are in true citizens of the same nation. Don't be afraid. Follow me. You may rest your horse at my place, and I shall see you off in the morning. Tripitaka was filled with delight when he heard these words, and he led his horse to follow the hunter. They passed the slope and again heard the howling of the wind. Sit here, elder, said Bakken, and don't move. The sound of that wind tells me that mountain cat is approaching. He'll take him home so that I can make a meal of him for you. When Tripitaka heard this, his heart hammered and his gall quivered and he became rooted to the ground. Grasping his trident, that guardian strode forward and came face to face. 179. With a great striped tiger. Seeing Bakken, he turned and fled. Like a crack of thunder, the guardian bellowed, "Cursed beast, what will you flee?" When the tiger saw him pressing near, he turned with flailing claws to spring at him, only to be met by the guardian with a uplifted trident. Tripitaka was so terrified that he lay paralyzed on the grass. Since leaving his mother's belly, when had he ever witnessed such violent and dangerous goings-on? The guardian went after that tiger to the foot of the slope, and it was a magnificent battle between man and beast. You see, raging resentment and churning whirlwind. In raging resentment, the potent guardian's hair pushed up his cap. Like churning whirlwind, the striped prince belched dust, displaying his might. This one bared its teeth and wielded his paws. That one stepped sideways, yet turning to fight. The trident reached skyward, reflecting the sun. The striped tail stirred up both fog and cloud. This one stabbed madly at the breast of his foe. That one, facing him, would swallow him whole. Stay away and you may live out your years. Join the fray and y'all meet Yama, the king. You hear the roar of the striped prince and the harsh cries of the guardian. The roar of the striped prince shook mountains and streams to frighten birds and beasts. The harsh cries of the guardian unlocked the heavens to make the stars appear. The gold eyeballs of this one protruded, and wrath burst from the bold heart of that one. Lovable was Lee the mountain guardian. Praiseworthy was this king of the wild beasts. So tiger and man fought, each craving life, a little slower, and one forfeits his soul. The two of them fought for about an hour, and as the pulse of the tiger began to slow and his torso to slacken, he was down by the guardian's trident, stabbing him through the chest. A pitiful sight it was. The points of the trident pierced the heart, and at once the ground was covered with blood. The guardian then dragged the beast by the ear up the road. What a man! He hardly panted, nor did his face change color. He said to Tripitaka, "We're lucky. We're lucky. This mountain cat should be sufficient for a day's food for the elder." Applauding him unceasingly, Tripitaka said, "The guardian is truly a mountain god." "What ability do I have," said Bakken, "that I merit such acclaim? This is really the good fortune of the Father. Let's go. I'd like to skin him quickly so that I can cook some of his meat to entertain you." He held the trident in one hand and dragged the tiger with the other, leading the way while Tripitaka followed him with his horse. They walked together past the slope and all at once came upon a mountain village, in front of which were old trees soaring skyward, roads filled with wild creepers. In countless canyons the wind was cool. On many ridges came strange sounds and sights. One passed wild blooms. Their scent clung to one's body. A few poles of bamboo, what enduring green. The portal of grass, the wattle-fenced yard, a picture to paint or sketch. The stone slab bridge, the white turf walls. How charming indeed, and rare. Now in the wistful face of autumn, the air was cool and brisk. By the wayside yellow leaves fell. Over the peaks the white clouds drifted. In thinly grown woods the wildfowls twittered, and young dogs yelped outside the village gate. When Bakken reached the door of his house, he threw down the dead tiger and called, "Little ones, where are you?" Out came 3 or 4 houseboys, all looking rather unattractive and mean, who hauled the tiger inside. Bakken told them to skin it quickly and prepare it for the guests. He then turned around to welcome Tripitaka into his dwelling, and as they greeted each other, Tripitaka thanked him again for the great favor of saving his life. "We are fellow countrymen," said Bakken, and there's little need for you to thank me. After they had sat down and drunk tea, an old woman with someone who appeared to be her daughter-in-law came out to greet Tripitaka. This is my mother, and this my wife, said Bakken. Pray ask your parent to take the honored seat, said Tripitaka, and let your poor monk pay his respects. Father is a guest coming from great distance, said the old woman. Please relax and dine. Tea stand on ceremony. Mother, said Bakken, he has been sent by the Tang Emperor to seek scriptures from Buddha in the Western Heaven. He met your son just now at the ridge. Since we are fellow countrymen, I invited him to the house to rest his horse. Tomorrow I shall see him on his way. When she heard these words, the old woman was very pleased. Good, 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 she said. The timing couldn't be better, even if we had planned to invite him. For tomorrow happens to be the anniversary of your late father's death. Let us invite the elder to perform some good deeds and recite an appropriate passage of scripture. We shall see him off day after tomorrow. Although he was a tiger slayer, a so-called guardian of the mountain, our late Bakken had a good deal of filial feeling for his mother. When he heard what she said, he immediately wanted to prepare the incense and the paper money so that Tripitaka might be asked to stay. As they talked, the sky began to darken. The servants brought chairs and a table and set out several dishes of well-cooked tiger meat, steaming hot. Bakken invited Tripitaka to begin, telling him that rice would follow. Oh dear, said Tripitaka, his hands folded. To tell you the truth, I have been a monk since leaving my mother's womb, and I have never eaten any meat. Hearing this, Bakken reflected a while. He then said, Elder, for generations this humble family has never kept a vegetarian diet. We could, I suppose, find some bamboo shoots and wood ears and prepare some dried vegetables and bean cakes, but they would all be cooked with the fat of deer or tigers. Even our pots and pans are greased, so what am I to do? I must ask the elder's pardon. Tea fret, said Tripitaka. Enjoy the food yourself. Even if I were not to eat for 3 or 4 days, I could bear the hunger, but I dare not break the dietary commandment. Suppose you starve to death, said Bakken. What then? I'm indebted to the heavenly kindness of the guardian, said Tripitaka, for saving me from the packs of tigers and wolves. Starving to death is better than being food for a tiger. When Bakken's mother heard this, she cried, Son, stop such idle talk with the elder. Let me prepare a vegetarian dish to serve him. Where would you get such a dish? Said Bakken. Never mind. I'll fix it, said his mother. She asked her daughter-in-law to take down a small cooking pan and heat it until much of the grease had burned off. They washed and scrubbed the pan again and then put it back on the stove and boiled some water in it. Taking some elm leaves from the mountain, they made soup with it, after which they cooked some rice with yellow millet mixed with Indian corn. They also prepared 2 bowls of dried vegetables and brought it all out to the table. Elder, the aged mother said to Tripitaka, please have some. This is the cleanest and purest food that my daughter-in-law and I have ever prepared. Tripitaka left his seat to thank her before sitting down again. Bakken removed himself to another place. Dishes and bowls full of unsauced and unsalted tiger meat, musk deer meat, serpent meat, fox flesh, rabbit, and strips of cured venison were set before him. To keep Tripitaka company, he sat down and was about to pick up his chopsticks when he saw Tripitaka fold his hands and begin to recite something. Startled, Bakken dared not touch his chopsticks. He jumped up instead and stood to one side. Having uttered no more than a few phrases, Tripitaka said to him, Please eat. You are a priest who likes to recite short scriptures, said Bakken. That was not scripture, said Tripitaka. Only a prayer to be said before meals. You people who leave your families, said Bakken, are particular about everything. Even for me you have to mumble something. They ate their dinner and the dishes and bowls were taken away. Evening was setting in when Bakken led Tripitaka out of the main hall to go for a walk at the back of the dwelling. They passed through a corridor and arrived at a straw shed. Pushing open the door, they walked inside, where they found several heavy bows and some quivers of arrows hanging on the walls. 2 pieces of tiger skin, stinking and bloodstained, were draped over the cross beams, and a number of spears, knives, tridents, and rods were stuck into the ground at one corner. There were 2 seats in the middle of the shed, and Bakken invited Tripitaka to sit for a moment. Seeing that the place was so gruesome and putrid, Tripitaka dared not linger. They soon left the shed and walked further back to a huge garden, where there seemed to be no end of thick clumps of chrysanthemum piling their gold and stands of maple hoisting their crimson. With a loud rustle, more than a dozen fat deer and a large herd of musk deer jumped out. Calm and mild-mannered, They were not at all frightened at the sight of human beings. Tripitaka said, "You must have tamed these animals, like the people in your city of Chan." And, said Bakken, "where the affluent store up wealth and treasures and the landlords gather rice and grain. But we hunters must keep some of these wild beasts to prepare against dark days." That's all. As they walked and conversed, it grew dark, and they returned to the house to rest. As soon as the members of the family, young and old, arose next morning, they went to prepare vegetarian food to serve to the priest, who was then asked to begin his recitations. Having first washed his hands, the priest went to the ancestral hall with the guardian to burn incense. Only after he had bowed to the house shrine did Tripitaka beat on his wooden fish and recite first the true sentences for the purification of the mouth, and then the divine formula for the purification of mind and body. He went on to the sutra, for the salvation of the dead, after which Bakken requested him to compose in writing a specific prayer for the deliverance of the deceased. He then took up the Diamond Sutra and the Guanyin Sutra, each of which was given a loud and clear recitation. After lunch, he recited several sections from the Lotus Sutra and the Amitaya Sutra, before finishing with the Peacock Sutra and a brief recounting of the story of Buddha healing the Bhik little 163U. Soon it was evening again. All kinds of incense were burned together with the various paper horses, images of the deities, and the prayer for the deliverance of the deceased. The Buddhist service was thus completed, and each person retired. We shall now tell you about the soul of Bakken's father, verily a ghost redeemed from perdition, who came to his own house and appeared to all the members of his family in a dream. It was difficult, he said, for me to escape my bitter ordeals in the region of darkness, and for a long time I could not attain salvation. Fortunately, the holy monk's recitations have now expiated my sins. King Yama has ordered someone to send me to the rich land of China, where I may assume my next incarnation in a noble family. All of you, therefore, must take care to thank the elder and see that you are not negligent in any way. Now I leave you. So it is that there is, in all things, a solemn purpose, to save the dead from perdition and pain. When the whole family awoke from the dream, the sun was already rising in the east. The wife of Bakken said, "Guardian, I dreamed last night that father came to the house. He said that it was difficult for him to escape his bitter ordeals in the region of darkness, and that for a long time he could not attain salvation. Fortunately, the holy monk's recitations have now expiated his sins, and King Yama has ordered someone to send him to the rich land of China where he may assume his next incarnation in a noble family. He told us to take care to thank the elder and not be negligent in any way." After he had finished speaking, he drifted away, despite my plea for him to stay. I woke up and it was all a dream. "I had a dream also," said Bakken, "one exactly like yours. Let's get up and talk to mother about this." The two of them were about to do so when they heard the old mother calling, "Bakken, come here. I want to talk to you." They went in and found the mother sitting up in bed. "Son," she said, "I had a happy dream last night. I dreamed that your father came to the house saying that, thanks to the redemptive work of the elder, his sins had been expiated. He is on his way to the rich land of China, where he will assume his next incarnation in a noble family." Husband and wife laughed uproariously. Bakken said, "Your daughter-in-law and I both had this dream, and we were just coming to tell you." Little did we expect that mother's call also had to do with this dream. They therefore called on every member of the family to express their gratitude and prepare the monk's horse for travel. They came bowing before the priest and said, "We thank the elder for providing life and deliverance for our deceased father, for which we can never repay you sufficiently. What has this poor monk accomplished?" said Tripitaka, "that merits such gratitude?" Bakken gave a thorough account of the dream that the three of them had, and Tripitaka was also very pleased. A vegetarian meal was again served, and a tael of silver was presented as a token of their gratitude. Tripitaka refused to accept so much as a penny, though the whole family begged him earnestly. He only said, "If, in compassion, you can escort me on the first part of my way, I shall ever be grateful for such kindness." Bakken and his mother and wife had little alternative but hastily to prepare some biscuits from unrefined flour, which Tripitaka was glad to accept. Bakken was told to escort him as far as possible. Obeying his mother's bidding, the guardian also ordered several houseboys to join them, each bringing hunting equipment and weapons. They walked to the main road, and there seemed to be no end to the scenic splendor of the mountains and peaks. When they had traveled for half a day, they came upon a huge mountain so tall and rugged that it truly seemed to touch the blue sky. In a little while the whole company reached the foot of the mountain, and the guardian began to ascend it as if he were walking on level ground. Halfway up, Bakken turned around and stood still at the side of the road, saying, "Elder, please go on yourself. I must not take leave of you," and turned back. When Tripitaka heard these words, he rolled down from his saddle and said, "I beg you to escort me a little further." "You do not realize, Elder," said Bakken, "that this mountain is called the Mountain of Two Frontiers. The eastern half belongs to our great Tang domain, but the western half is the territory of the Tartars. The tigers and wolves over there are not my subjects, nor should I cross the border. You must proceed by yourself." Tripitaka became fearful. He stretched out his hands and clutched at the sleeves of the hunter, tears pouring from his eyes. It was at this tender moment of farewell that there came from beneath the mountain a thunderous voice crying, "My master has come! My master has come!" 184. Tripitaka was dumbfounded, and Bakken trembled. We do not know who was crying. Let's listen to the explanation in the next chapter.